But what is behind this emergent alliance between Iran and Russia?
Russia wants to learn from Iran's long experience of bypassing Western experience to bypass the Western sanctions.
Іранці зацікавлені у співпраці з росіянами, але разом з тим там існують і суперечності.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Euro-Atlantic Course. My name is Alexandra Tsekhanovska, and today we once more turn our gaze to the global south and its reaction and perception of the Russian war against Ukraine. The region is, of course, very diverse, yet it is precisely where Russia is trying to find new partners and allies, having been subjected to almost total isolation in the West. Our focus today is mostly on Iran as a country that Russia, an alleged military superpower, has requested drones from. But we also talk about Syria, keeping in mind the long-standing alliance between the regimes of Vladimir Putin and Bashar Assad. If you want to know more, please subscribe to our channel to stay tuned. Despite the fact that Russian propaganda desperately keeps trying to portray the Russian military as the second army in the world, mighty and undefeatable, this myth keeps crumbling with every day of the ongoing war against Ukraine. In addition to having big problems in terms of command and control, the old Soviet structure that is a poor counterweight to Ukrainian more creative and decentralized military, Russia has already felt the impact of sanctions. One of their key goals is slowly but surely being reached, and Russian capacity to repair damaged equipment and produce new weapons is severely damaged. That doesn't mean that Russia should be underestimated. At the very least, they still have a substantial supply of missiles consistently used to terrorize the civilian population of Ukraine. But the overall military capacity is slowly decreasing. Turning to Iran for drones was a sign of desperation, yet it got many of us worried. How effective could the potential alliance between the two countries be? In fact, there are more issues to tackle here. Is this partnership actually new? What else must be driving Moscow closer to Teheran? We talked to Maria Zolkina, a brilliant analyst from Ilko Kucherev Democratic Initiative Foundation, to find out.
At this very moment, Ukraine is extremely interested in making it completely impossible to any country around the world to send any kinds of military support to the Russian Federation. That is why we are so much reasonably concerned with the possibility that Iran will start or have started maybe already sending its unmanned aerial vehicles to the Russian army. But what is behind this emergent alliance between Iran and Russia, or actually strengthening alliance between Iran and Russia, and how it might influence Ukraine's attempts to preserve the international coalition or to find new allies, for instance, in the Middle East. So first of all, what are the goals of Russia when it comes to this coalition with Iran? Russia is interested to show to the global south that while Western structures, while the richest part of the world, meaning European Union, US, G7, NATO, have excluded Russia almost completely from all possible normal schemes of cooperation, Russia is still not in the full international isolation. And Iran is just a starting point to show that it's possible to have military, economic, political cooperation with Russia, to make some other countries from Africa, from Middle East, from Asia, from Latin America, to start thinking about open support to some relations and partnership with the Russian Federation. Second reason why Russia is interested in that is the principle of making friendship against someone. It's very simple, but so much reasonable for the Moscow right now. Russia wants to divide international community as much as possible. This is their strategy. They want to crack down the unity of the Western structures, Western anti-Putin coalition on the one hand, and they want to make it clear deep divisions between West and global south on the other hand. And here again, they want a showcase. They want to use this rapprochement with Iran to show that it's possible, it's reasonable, it can be constructive and beneficial for countries outside of the western part of the world to keep relations with Russia open and functional. How Russia tries to pursue this, how Russia tries to implement these goals when it comes to political and informational environment. First of all, I think that the attempt to establish this kind of specific relations with Iran, which also suffers from severe Western sanctions, is that not just to have relations, of course, with Iran itself, but to penetrate to political and informational environment of the Middle East and Africa in a deeper and more complex way than it was before. Of course, Russia worked with Middle East, with North Africa, with Africa in general for decades, in contrast to Ukraine, for instance. But at the same time, right now, a large share of local population in Arabic countries, for instance, they have a warm attitude towards Ukraine. They understand that this aggression is unprovoked, that Russia didn't have any right to violate territorial integrity of Ukraine. They refer to the example of Palestine, by the way, which seems a bit strange for Ukrainians, but I have heard in the Middle East for many times that they compare us to the Palestine because part of the Palestine territories were illegally occupied by Israel, which is not actually recognized by international community. For instance, on the western part of the Jordan River. So Russia wants in informational space to use specific pillars of its Russian propaganda to undermine the support to Ukraine, to undermine the concept that Russia is not worth to be supported openly and to keep relations openly with. What are these pillars which are used by Russian propaganda? First of all, anti-Americanism. Of course, America in the Middle East have a specific and pretty negative experience of relations with local peoples. First of all, the story with Iraq created completely different image, not of the frontman of front state of democracy, but of invaders and occupational practice, actually. And Russia is using these anti-American sentiments and moods among Arabic people to show that if America is supporting Ukraine, then nothing good in that. Secondly, they try to use the idea that Ukraine is completely dependent on the Western countries' state, so the Ukraine is actually the failed state, and they are jumping from the first pillar to the second one, that if America is, let's say, a bad guy in international arena, then and if they completely rule what is going on in Ukraine, and if America, as Russian propaganda claims, fight by the hand of Ukrainian army, so why to support Ukraine? Ukraine doesn't exist as an international independent actor, so why to take care about Ukraine's interests? And the third pillar of the Russian propaganda in the region is that regardless of ongoing aggression, Russia will not be defeated, because it's a nuclear power, because no one will be interested in having Russia completely destroyed, and that Russia is so strong from military point of view that it's regardless of how long this conflict will last, Russia will anyway be in a winning position, just simply for the fact that it's larger military power than Ukraine is. And of course, the reality, when Ukrainian army is fighting pretty effectively to repel Russia's attack, undermine this Russian concept, but Russia is very strong in pushing this message that regardless of what is going on, we will anyway prevail sooner or later. And that's how Russian propaganda basically looks like. And attempt of Russia to penetrate into informational environment of the Middle East with the new messages, using the idea that Iran is one of the main regional powers, is supporting some kind of relations with Russia. Russia will always use that, and Russia will try to make other countries in the Middle East at least start thinking about doing some business with Russia more openly, or to return to business, because as of now some countries like in the Gulf region, they have frozen their investments in the Russian Federation, though they didn't, for instance, like Qatar, join the Western sanctions. And the idea of Russia is to start cracking down this negative reaction to the Russian aggression from the Middle East and African continent.
Evidently, Russia is keen on solidifying its relations with Iran. Maria has given us a good look at how these efforts are unfolding now. But it is also worthwhile to understand that these relations have been initiated way before the start of the Russian war against Ukraine, which happened in 2014, in case you forgot. As our next speaker will explain, Iran draws Russian attention quite naturally. And first and foremost, it is its experience of dealing with Western sanctions for a very long time. But what about Syria then? Kamran Matin, Associate Professor of International Relations at Sussex University in the United Kingdom, will tell us more.
Russia's partnership and relations with Iran and Syria predates Russia's invasion of Ukraine. For Russia, Syria is a strategic foothold in the Arab Middle East. And while the Ukrainian invasion has forced Russia to redeploy some of its forces from Syria to Ukraine, Russia is unlikely to leave Syria in entirety. Russia's access to certain Syrian ports in the Mediterranean gives Russia some military presence in the Mediterranean and in the region, and also provides some level of diplomatic support, especially for domestic purposes in Russia, given that Syria is openly supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. With respect to Iran, Russia wants to learn from Iran's long experience of bypassing Western experience to bypass the Western sanctions which it has been under since its invasion of Ukraine. Russia also wants to give support to Iran so that it maintains a maximalist approach to nuclear negotiations with the West, and therefore reduce the chances for a nuclear agreement between Iran and the United States. Because in this way, Western resources, and especially the United States attention and diplomatic and military resources, will be diverted to the Iranian theater, and therefore reduces the pressure on Russia in Ukraine. Russia also wants to expand its trade with Iran because both countries are under Western sanctions, and therefore might engage in barter economy and other kind of mutual investments. But this is unlikely to bear fruit or change either country's economy in any meaningful sense, given the degree to which both countries' economies are reliant on Western trade and expertise and technological advancements. With respect to drones, Iran can provide armed drones to Russia, and here the main issue is the number, not the quality of the drones, because apparently Russian military industry is incapable of producing the number of drones it needs, and Iran might help in this regard Russian military activity in Ukraine, but I doubt that this will change strategically the battlefield in Ukraine, given the kind of Western support that Ukraine will receive and is receiving. But Iran has also an interest in maintaining the fighting in Ukraine, which it does so by giving Russia drones, because so long as the West is engaged with Russia over Ukraine, it will be able to exercise less pressure on Iran, and also it enables Iran to maintain its maximalist approach in the nuclear negotiations. So this partnership has mutual benefits for both sides, but I doubt that it will strategically change either country's situation and relationships with the West to their advantage.
We've discussed Russian motivation to share closer ties with Iran and Syria, or rather the Syrian regime. How mutual this interest is, and are there any restraints that would hold these countries and their leadership back from alliance with Russia? How the internal situation in Syria, where Assad rules perhaps solely due to the brutal Russian backup, influences these developments? Finally, how legitimate are the concerns of Iran passing drones to Russia secretly? Ihor Samovolos, the executive director of Association of Middle East Studies, will give us the answers that we need.
Почнемо, напевно, з Сирії. Це важко назвати цю країну партнером, оскільки, по суті, цієї країни не існує, а режим Башара Асада тримається, власне, завдяки тому, що Росія вдерлася в цю країну, здійснила агресію в 2015 році, підтримавши цей режим. І, по суті, цей альянс, його важко назвати альянсом двох країн. Да, це скоріше країна і колонія. По суті, Росія визначає в значній мірі політичні нюанси, політичну траєкторію цього режиму. Щодо Ірану, тут насправді цікаво. Іран – це країна, яка має свої власні інтереси на Близькому Сході. Свого часу саме завдяки Ірану вдалося на землі відбити атаки повстанців в Сирії, і іранці зацікавлені у співпраці з росіянами. Але разом з тим там існують і суперечності, в тому числі суперечності, хто, власне, головний бенефіціар цієї війни, сирійської війни. Станом на зараз ясна річ, що іранці зацікавлені в контактах з Росією, тому що це також створює додатковий тиск на американців, посилює їхні переговорні позиції і, по суті, шантажує американців, до певної міри шантажує американців таким альянсом. Треба відзначити, що іранці все одно не довіряють росіянам, ніколи не довіряли і довіряти не будуть. І всередині самого Ірану існує чимало людей, в тому числі серед політиків, впливових політиків, колишніх президентів, зокрема, які виступають проти союзу з Росією. І той факт, що зараз ця консервативна частина, більш радикальна частина корпусу вартових ісламської революції, яка прийшла до влади, намагається далі посунутися в напрямку цього союзу, це ще не означає, що ситуація не зміниться в майбутньому. Очевидно, що говорити поки про сталий союз російсько-іранський не варто. Тобто це все-таки перспектива, можливо, майбутнього. Багато що буде залежати від того, де опиниться Росія за результатами цієї війни. Наскільки Росія буде успішною в цій війні або не успішною. Я не думаю, що Іран, як близькосхідна країна, яка має в першу чергу інтереси в регіоні і не претендує на якісь глобальні місця і ролі, аж так зацікавлена у втягуванні своєї країни, іранське керівництво, а так зацікавлено в втягуванні своєї країни в конфлікт Європі. Я не бачу можливості отримати безпілотники таємно. Навіть якщо факт передачі цих безпілотників може відбутися таємно, що сумнівно. Але використання цих безпілотників в війні проти України одразу поставить все на свої місця. Тому що частина цих безпілотників обов'язково буде збита українськими протиповітряною обороною. І, відповідно, уламки з відповідними даними потрапить до рук українців, і ми будемо чітко знати, що це іранський безпілотник. Врешті-решт, іранці насправді могли б так само абсолютно легітимно продавати ці безпілотники росіянам. Тобто ніхто їх не може змусити не продавати. Але вони чомусь вустами міністра закордонних справ Ірану спростовують це твердження. Значить, існують якісь застереження, які змушують їх, власне, діяти у такий спосіб. А це означає, що в Тегерані, як мінімум, рахують можливі негативні наслідки такого факту. І не факт, знов-таки, що ця оборудка відбулася. Не факт, що, врешті-решт, безпілотники потрапили в російську армію. Знов-таки, мені здається, що все от що ми бачимо навколо російсько-іранських відносин і декларацій, які звучать, це скоріше спроба торгу іранців з американцями.
You've been watching this special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Euro-Atlantic Course, Ukraine in Flames. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. In the description to this episode, you can find information on how you personally can help Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression. Remember that everything is going to be Ukraine.